All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started in with today's video lesson. Today we're going to be talking about um, cellular respiration. So we're going to be talking about more detail about cellular respiration. I know that in the previous video I gave you guys a general idea of what it was. Today I'm going to go a little bit more in detail, not too much, but a little bit more than we did in our last video. So the first thing that I want to let you guys know is that whenever we undergoes or the cells undergo cellular respiration, number one is that of course there needs to be oxygen present, and we're going to see why in just a little bit. And secondly is that cellular respirations in cells are actually composed of three processes or three different steps. The first step is glycolysis. The second step is the Krebs cycle, and the final step is the electron transport chain. So what I've done here is I've summarized to the best of my abilities the process that is involved in cellular respiration. And the reason I've done that is to give you guys more of an overview, or more, a more in-depth look at what cellular respiration is. So let's start with glycolysis. And glycolysis, the first step in glycolysis is that a series of enzymes and a chemical reaction rearrange the three carbon molecule. Remember that carbon, or that glucose, is broken down into two 3-carbon molecules, and then that 3-carbon molecule actually goes into glycolysis. So the first step is that chemical reactions rearrange the 3-carbon molecules. Secondly is that energized electrons from the 3-carbon molecules are transformed to NAD plus and NADH. The 3-carbon molecule, and the 3-carbon molecule is converted into pyruvate. So pyruvate. So remember that we have glucose. That glucose breaks down to two 3-carbon molecules, and then that 2 3-carbon molecule, through a series of chemical reactions, actually turns into NAD positive, and that forms NADH, and then that 3-carbon molecule is turned into pyruvate, and it's the pyruvate that actually goes into cellular respiration. Now, one very important thing to remember is that in the glycolysis process, 2 ATP molecules are formed. Actually, it's 4, but remember that you use 2 to make the pyruvate. So actually, you have a net gain of 2 ATP molecules. Now, once the glycolysis process is done, now we enter into the second stage of cellular respiration, which is the Krebs cycle. And the first step in the Krebs cycle is that pyruvate from glycolysis is broken down. So that pyruvate molecule that was formed in glycolysis is actually broken down, and coenzyme A bonds to the 2-carbon molecule. That means that the 3-carbon molecule that was the pyruvate is broken down, and coenzyme A bonds to the 2-carbon molecule, and then it forms an intermediate molecule, and that intermediate molecule enters the Krebs cycle, or continues on in the Krebs cycle. The third step is that citric acid is formed. Once the citric acid is formed in the third step, it's broken down and NADH is made. And then the fifth step is that 5-carbon molecule that is broken down, and NADH and ATP are made. Now, there is a generation of, or a forming of ATP in this in the Krebs cycle, and then the sixth step is that 4-carbon molecule is rearranged by NADH and FADH2. Now it's actually these two molecules here, the NADH and the FADH2, that enter into the final stage of cellular respiration, which is the electron transport chain. Now, in the electron transport chain is where we have more ATP being formed. So I know that ATP forms here, but in the electron transport chain is where the net production of ATP is formed. So in the first step of the electron transport chain is that the electrons are removed from NADH and FADH2. So you have to look at this kind of like a conveyor belt, like an assembly line. Each process has its function, and each process has key reactions that undergo or that play an important role in them. Once the electrons are removed from these two molecules, this is that hydrogen ions are transported across the membrane. Now, mind you, that in this step, they're transported across the membrane and energy is used, okay? And they create what is called a chemostatic gradient because of the transfer of hydrogen, and then it says that ADP is changed into ATP, where hydrogen ions flow through ATP synthase. So actually, in the third step, to be specific, is where the ADP and ATP are formed. Okay, and this is where, and specifically the ATP synthase is the molecule or the enzyme that actually adds that third phosphate group in ADP to turn it into ATP. So again, electrons are removed, hydrogen ions are transported across the membrane, creating a chemostatic gradient, and then that third phosphate group is added to ADP to make ATP with the help of when hydrogen ions are flowing and through the ATP synthase, which is the enzyme that does that. Finally, in the fourth step of the electron transport chain is where we see the oxygen involved. It says that water is formed when oxygen picks up electrons and hydrogen. So that oxygen in that part picks up the hydrogens and the electrons. And what happens is that they take them again, go all the way back, and the cycle starts again in glycolysis. Okay, so water is a waste product, and that's why oxygen is so important. So if we compare the cellular respiration process to the or to photosynthesis, we need that carbon dioxide, that oxygen, that photosynthesis gives us, because we intake that oxygen to get the cellular respiration started. Specifically, that and the combination of the foods that we eat make the glucose, which then starts the process so that glucose is converted into pyruvate, and we have the cellular respiration cycle start again. So guys, this is just a very brief and short summary of cellular respiration. Hopefully this is helpful. So we'll see each other in our next class. So stay safe and bye.